We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Welcome back to a brand new year of Talking Liberty here on Liberty Nation Radio. What does the year hold ahead for the constitutionally minded folk out there in the great United States? Will abortion finally be settled law? Will the Second Amendment be strengthened or weakened? Well, to answer these questions and a great many others, we welcome back Legal Affairs Editor and Uprising podcast host, Mr. Scott D. Cosenza, Esquire, to give us a preview of the year ahead. Happy New Year to you, Scott.
Cheers, Mark, and Happy New Year to you. And this is a coffee cup, but there's not coffee inside it. I won't say if there's champagne in there or not, but cheers in any case.
Absolutely. Now, Scott, I have to start off with the simple questions. We're looking into this year for the Supreme Court. We're looking for decisions on abortion and gun cases. Give me the details.
Well, the big case, the Mississippi abortion case, whether or not pre-viability restrictions on abortion are going to be allowed. Basically, this is the case that people are hoping and or fearing that will overturn Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood v. Casey, the two major landmark legal decisions in that area. That's to be expected late spring, sometime before the court breaks for its summer recess. The other one is the New York State rifle and pistol case, which concerns the issuance of permits or licenses to carry firearms and whether or not the states have to apply a kind of universal standard towards those applicants, or whether they can just grant them to their friends and their brother-in-laws and people who give them campaign contributions, which is how it works in New York.
So will issue versus may issue, yeah?
Actually, yeah, that's exactly right. We say shall issue. So generally it's may issue versus shall issue. And that case will also, along with the abortion case, both of those cases have been argued as we've discussed previously on Liberty Nation Radio, and they will be decided sometime in 2022.
Okay, now, Scott, there's another thing that you brought to my attention. This is Shurtleff versus the city of Boston. I think this is a pretty interesting one for our listeners. Care to give us the rundown?
Well, Boston has 3 flagpoles at its city hall. One flies the United States flag, Old Glory. One flies the Commonwealth of Massachusetts state flag. And the third flagpole was put up and allowed for people in Boston to fly whatever flag they wanted to celebrate some cause or event or something like that. And from 2005 to 2017, the city approved every single request it got, which was 284 requests to fly different flags. And then came the first denial when a group called Camp Constitution, which is a religious volunteer organization, asked to fly a flag featuring the red Latin cross to commemorate Constitution Day. Well, that was just too much free speech for the city fathers of Boston to allow. And they said they would not allow a religious flag, quote, this is so great, out of concern for the so-called separation of church and state. So it's just, I'm laughing because, it seems to be, Mark, a crystal clear violation of the right to free speech because it's a content-based restriction on free speech and also, a religious-based content exclusion on free speech. Because they approved all of the non-religious messages that were asked to be flown and then are restricting this religious one, I don't think they're going to be granted protection under some sort of, separation of church and state thing. I hope and think this will be stricken down as an impermissible imposition on free speech.
So presumably here, the remedy, Scott, should this go in Shurtleff's favor, is that A, the flag will be flown at the Boston City Hall for at least one day, and then B, that the city of Boston will be less likely to try and restrict any liberties under the 5 precepts, the 5 tenets of the First Amendment.
Well, for the second part of your question, I wouldn't be confident that the Pauls in Boston are going to go ahead and give conservatives and Republicans and people who are non-liberals or progressives any kind of fair hearing when it comes to their rights. So I don't know that that's true. And actually, for the first part of your the supposition that they will be forced to fly, I don't think that's necessarily true. That's called specific performance, which is not always granted in lawsuits. more than likely it'll be damages, money damages that they have to pay, or they can or they will have to fly the flag. One of the things we've seen in the past, Mark, is when these petty tyrants don't get their way, they'll bulldoze that third flagpole, and nobody gets to fly it after everybody's ruled to have had to have equal access to it.
Well, they'll just have to take down the flag of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for a day, won't they? So another issue that I want to discuss for the coming year, there's the Federal Election Commission versus Ted Cruz for Senate. Now, this is Ted Cruz, not the man himself, but the presumably the super PAC or the organization behind his next election bid.
Well, it's actually both. He's one of the named folks in the suit. Mark, I'm always fascinated when somebody sets out to get a case before the Supreme Court, not when it's in an advanced appellate stature, but when it's just getting started and they succeed. And that's what Ted Cruz has done here. The Federal Election Commission has many regulations that seemingly trample on the First Amendment, and this is, I think, one of them. It's not necessarily a big deal for most folks, but for candidates for office, it is a big deal. And the regulation here is that candidates often loan money to their campaign. So they want to start. You want to run for office in the United States. Ted Cruz wants to run for Senate. He needs to spend money to do so, to win. And fundraising isn't as successful early on when that's really when it makes the most difference. There's a saying called early money is like yeast. It makes the dough rise. So the earlier that a candidate gets money, the more successful their candidacy is going to be. So there's an impetus to fund it early. So candidates often loan their campaigns this money. And this regulation concerns how long the campaign has to pay them back and the amount that they can pay them back. And so what Ted Cruz did in order to get this law challenged before the Supreme Court was the day before the election, he loaned his campaign, I think it was $260,000. Now, the rule said that they couldn't pay back more than $250,000. So this only concerns $10,000, which in the scheme of the Texas senatorial race is a drop in the bucket, but that's what we're talking about. But it was engineered to get before the Supreme Court, and they're going to rule if this regulation is an imposition on free speech. I think it is, and we'll have to see what the court says.
It's good publicity for Senator Cruz to be holding a case before the Supreme Court, especially as elections are not too far away. I think that $10,000 is money well spent for him. Now, one more case I'd like to discuss, Scott, is Conception versus the United States. I think this is a pretty fascinating one. What's the deal?
This case, Mark, has to do with whether or not somebody who is criminally. So Mr. Conception was convicted of having crack in 2009, I think. In 2010, the sentencing for those same crimes was changed radically and reduced radically. He got a 20-year sentence, I think, for crack cocaine. And then when they changed the law, they drastically reduced the sentence. And then I think it was 2018 when they passed another law that said that people who had been sentenced previous to the law's sentencing change should have their sentences or could have their sentences adjusted and reviewed. Mr. Conception filed a request for the federal court to have his sentence reduced, commensurate with the new sentencing guidelines that were passed a year after his conviction. And the court looked at the law and said, no, we're not going to reduce your sentence. And the question is, does he have by legal right, does he have the right to have his sentence reduced under that law? And I think it's fascinating. I haven't looked at, and I don't know if this number has been published. Actually, I did look for it and don't know if it's been published, which is the sheer number of the many, many people in federal prison who are there for drug crimes, how many this affects. But surely it's well beyond just Mr. Conception. The number of people who are sitting in prison now who, if they were convicted for the same crime, but after 2010, would be out of prison because of the way that the sentencing guidelines have changed.
I think we'll be following this story quite closely, Scott. Well, I want to thank you for giving us an overview of the year ahead. Much appreciated, and I wish you all the best in 2022, Scott.
And to you and to all the listeners as well, Mark. I share the sentiment. Cheers.
Cheers. And that's about it for this episode of Liberty Nation Radio here on the Radio America Network. I'd like to thank our guests for appearing on this special New Year's show, economist and author Andrew Moran, writer Joe Schaefer, constitutional expert Scott Cosenza, and our very sincere gratitude to longtime host of this here show, Tim Donner, for his entertaining and enlightening signature Say What Roundup. And let's not forget you, the constant listener. Thanks for being here and making everything worthwhile. I'll leave you with a couple of thoughts on the new year. This is often a time that we make resolutions. Some of us let them slip by before the snow has even melted, and others have cast them off as a bad idea and just don't make them anymore. After all, as the saying goes, we can change our lives and our outlooks in the fraction of a second, on the turning of a dime, literally at any single moment during the year. But in defense of New Year's resolutions, it seems to me that the very universe is acting in congruence with us when we make a personal pledge as the year turns. The Earth has decided to start its long trek around the sun once more. The very seasons have made the choice to begin again, and the nature that surrounds is getting set for a second chance at life. G.K. Chesterton wrote, "The object of a new year is not that we should have a new year. It is that we should have a new soul and a new nose, new feet, a new backbone, new ears and new eyes." Unless a particular man made New Year's resolutions, he would make no resolutions. Unless a man starts afresh about things, he will certainly do nothing effective, end quote. And for me, this is the beating heart of New Year's resolutions. We should not be looking to make subtle adjustments, but to make sweeping changes. If only in attitude alone, we must recommit ourselves to that which is important with a gusto that leaves those watching on in silent awe. We don't have to learn a new skill or get better at housekeeping to make a significant positive change in our lives. When we recommit to those that we love, when we determine that from this moment on, our hearts will be given over to the people or ideals that burn for us, well, that's the greatest resolution possible. That's what makes history. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides. Who are we? We are Americans that believe in liberty. We are a project of the nonprofit One Generation Away. We are patriots who apply the founding principles to the issues of today.
And they keep moving the goalposts on us.
We are educators and commentators who love America and the Constitution. Who are we? We are Liberty Nation.